Hello, and thank you for joining me. Today, we're going to talk about markets and why this is so important. You've probably all heard location, location, location. In real estate, that's one of the most important things. So we're going to dive into markets and where you invest really matters, how to select markets that set you up for success. So let's dive in to it right here. Let me make it so you can see the screen a little bit better here. So first of all, here's what we're going to learn today. We're going to identify what makes a market strong and spot red flags in a market. We're going to track key data such as population, jobs, income, rental demand, those kinds of things. We want to understand market strategies for both active and passive investing. They're not necessarily the same. And we're going to recognize benefits of geographic focus, such as insurance and keys, and taxes and portfolio issues. And finally, we're going to think about how we choose one or two markets that align with our goals, because your goals are also going to factor into what markets you want to be in. So let's jump straight into it. So first, let's talk about what makes a strong market and whether or not you even want to be in a strong market. So it does depend, again, on your goals. And I talk a lot about goals, but you need to understand what you want in order to be able to go for the right thing. So strong markets are good because your property is going to appreciate much faster. And for a lot of people, it's that exit when you resell the property and the increased value there that is the big cha-ching, right? But for other people, it might be more about cash flow while they're holding it. Or some combination thereof. So if you were just going for a cash flow play, you may not want to be in a strong market, or at least not the strongest markets, because it's going to be more expensive to buy properties there. So you may actually wish to be in a more stable market than a strong or the strongest markets, because you can get in at a lower price point but still get the cash flow. But you do not want to be in a weak market that's decreasing, okay? But for right now, we're going to assume that you want to be in a strong market that's going to appreciate well. You may not have as much cash flow on the front end, but it will increase over time, and then you'll have a big exit. So strong market, steady population growth, and job creation is key here. If the population isn't growing, it's going to stagnate and become a stable market. And continuous job creation is really important here. And you want to make sure that those jobs are in multiple different sectors by multiple different job providers, not all hinging on one provider that could potentially leave the market at some point. Strong income levels and rental demand. Obviously, you need folks to be able to afford the product that you're providing, right? And you want to make sure there is a rental demand, not just a demand to buy houses. Some markets, everybody has so much money, they just want to go buy their own thing. Nobody wants to rent. So you need to make sure there's strong rental demands. Supportive local and state regulations. So what do I mean by this? So not all areas are the same when it comes to landlord-tenant rules. Then we saw some issues during COVID. Some places you weren't allowed to evict people if they weren't paying rent. Some places you couldn't collect the back pay later after COVID was over. Some are just harder overall, like someone could be tearing up your place and stay there for like 6 to 9 months while you're trying to get rid of them. So there are all sorts of local and state regulations that you need to be aware of when you're choosing your markets, as far as what you're willing to stand and put up with, right? And it's going to factor in. I mean, if the rents are so much greater than somewhere else, maybe you're willing to tolerate some regulations that maybe aren't super favorable, but it's made up for in other ways. But just be aware of what they are. But for strong markets, it's usually very landlord-favored regulations. Balanced affordability for upside potential. Okay, so let's break that down. What does upside potential mean? So upside potential is basically where are the rents now and where can they go if you do various improvements. Let's say you buy something that was built in the 80s and it's never been renovated on the inside and you go do those renovations. How far can the area really afford to pay to go up to in rent and still make it affordable for them to live, right? We generally don't want to surpass 1/3 of someone's income going to housing expenses. In some areas, it might be like a 1 to 5. I've invested in like Rapid City, South Dakota, where it was like 1 to 5 ratio. People just make a lot of money there compared to what it costs to rent a place there. So their collections aren't really an issue. In other places, affordability is really, really tight. So even if you do all these great things to fix it up, you can't really push the rents and make up for the cost of doing all those renovations because there just isn't enough leeway there. So you need to look at that balance between affordability and the upside potential. All right, red flags, population loss, obviously. If a bunch of people are moving out of there, that's a problem, right? We saw this again, going back to COVID. We saw people moving from California and New York. So the real estate values in those areas really dropped and demand really dropped. So you want to make sure you are where the population is going to, not where it's leaving from. Weak job base, a lot of times those play together, right? If there's not good jobs, people start leaving the area. But also that one employer kind of thing could be a problem, or one industry. And poor infrastructure. If there aren't good roads to get people to other places, maybe there aren't a lot of jobs right there, but maybe there are jobs close by, but your highway system is just really bad. Or maybe the school systems aren't great, or other supportive services. So look at the infrastructure and whether it is friendly towards development and job creation. All right, key data points to track because of that. Obviously, we've talked about population growth, but there's places where you can get data on migration trends, where people moving to, coming from. So that's really good. The job creation and employment rates, those can be found on a lot of what are they called? Not the consumer. I think I have a slide on it later, but basically every community is going to have an area, community development. That's the word I'm looking for. They're going to have a website because they're trying to attract business to there. That's going to share their job creation, employment rates and stuff for that particular area. So you want to check those key data points. Household income levels. This can also be found on a lot of city data sites. So you want to see what those income levels are. And again, we definitely don't want to surpass a third of their income towards housing expenses. And if we can keep it to less than that, that's even better. Rental demand, vacancy rates, also really important, and when you're looking at them, make sure you're looking at the right types of units for the property you're considering buying or investing in, right? So if you have a property that's all 1 bedroom, so you're probably looking for like a single person or just a couple without kids, something like that. The rental demand for that might be very different than 3 and 4 bedroom units, right? So look at it in proportion to that. Affordability ratios, we've talked about that. Again, you can get that kind of ratio data from all these websites. I'll give you some websites in a minute. Looking into those local laws. Also insurance. Insurance varies greatly across the country, and you need to be aware of this. So I'm in Florida. I'm in Central Florida. That's a little different than being Florida on the coast. But even Central Florida, if I'm living on a lake or a river, there could be flooding issues or wetland. All of those things can affect your insurance. On the coast, of course, you have the threat of hurricanes, so that's a big issue there. So definitely look into those kinds of stuff. And local incentives, a lot of times there are opportunity zones you can invest in with lots of great tax benefits. And there's a lot of affordable housing, rental incentives, and tax incentives from that too. Tax abatement, that's the word I was looking for. So look for any incentives like that in the market that you're considering. So you want to collect all that data on maybe 4 or 5 different markets that you're looking at, and then you're going to pare it down to 1 or 2 places. Okay, let's talk about active investor focus. So this is for people who are actively going to go buy a property, manage the property, or put together a team that's going to do it for a syndication purpose, or perhaps as a joint venture. So if you're that person, this is for you. First of all, 1 market, 2 at the most. And then you want to go deep into that market instead of spreading yourself too thin and trying to learn all sorts of different markets, everything in your state or multiple states. Go deep into 1 place, and here's why. One of the reasons is it's going to make you an expert in those markets, and that's going to build your credibility with brokers. I cannot overemphasize the importance of broker relationships when you are in the commercial and multifamily business. So far more important than in the single family residential, because you don't have an MLS to go find all the available properties, and off market is far more difficult because these are more sophisticated sellers, so they're less likely just to be selling somebody knocking on the door, right? So the brokers are going to have the deals, and if you are good with them, and if they trust you and they know that you know your markets and you're not going to waste their time, then they're more likely to bring you the deal before they go bringing it to everybody out there, right? Before they go broadly broadcasting the sale. So, and you're going to be able to tell them right away if it interests you. So if they tell you, hey, I've got a Class B property, 50 units, northeast side of town, built in 1980 at $150,000 per unit, you're instantly going to know if that is a good deal or a bad deal. Just ballpark. Maybe it's like, oh, that's a little high for that area, or maybe that's a great deal, because you know your market, you know what the values are in different places, and you'll know what approximately the insurance costs are in that area, or what the taxes might be, what intricacies there might be, regulations or whatnot in that area. So you don't have to say, hey, let me go research all that and come back to you. Like right away, you can say, yeah, that's of interest to me, or no, it isn't. And brokers don't mind if you say no. They just hate if you take 3-4 days to get back to them to say no, because that's time that they could be selling it to somebody else, or somebody else is going to beat them to it, right? So they like people who can move quickly. Knowing your market and being an expert is really going to help you do that. It's also going to be way easier underwriting. Like I said, you're already going to know some basics about the prices, so you can spitball it and know if it's even of interest before you dig deep into the underwriting, right? And you're not going to have to go figure out what the cost of renovations are here, what contractors are charging for flooring and roofs and all that. You're going to know it because you know your market. And so it's just going to be much faster. I know me, I underwrite like 50 to 100 deals for every one that I actually end up buying. I might end up putting an offer on quite a few more, right? But it takes a lot of underwriting to get to a good deal. You don't want to do everything from scratch every single time. So if you're just in a market or two, that's going to be much, much faster for you. So that's a good reason to do it. Also, way easier to manage nearby assets. So I've made this mistake. I bought properties over here and over there because I thought they were good deals. But you know what? Buying them, that's a short-term thing. Managing them is a long-term thing. So after just spending a short time buying them, now for years and years, I have to deal with these assets that are all over the place, right? And if I'm self-managing those, that means I'm driving all over the place, which is a lot of my time. If I am using a third-party manager, I'm probably not using the same property manager on all those properties, right? So I have to talk to all these different people. So think about it. If you have 10 properties and you want to be a good asset manager, which means you have to manage your property managers, that's going to be 10 different calls every week with 10 different property managers to keep an eye on those properties, versus if you had them all together, you could have one property manager and have one call a week and see how all it's doing. And you're probably going to get a better deal with that property manager, and he's going to give you more of his attention because you have a bigger portfolio with him, right? So keep that in mind. Just way easier on the management front. And there's the potential to package asset as a portfolio. Now, what do I mean by that? So we can package it for a property manager to get lower property management costs, right? Maybe it goes from 10% to 8% or 7% or whatever it is for your third-party management. If you just had smaller units and you're going to have a higher rate there. But you can also package for insurance purposes. As insurance costs are skyrocketing, we see more and more of this where you package them together and you get a better rate. But it only works if they're close in geography. And sometimes you can package them with your property managers. So they might get a package deal for all their assets under management if they have a lot of them under the same umbrella. So, and then finally, you can package them for finance purposes, right? You can have a portfolio, or you could sell it as a portfolio. So there's lots of different ways you can benefit from doing this. So think about if they're all together, you could do that, and it might be worth a lot more because all your expenses go down, and we know NOI drives the value of your property, right? All right, so that was active strategy. Now we're going to look at this from a passive investor's point of view. And this is going to be very different because a passive investor, they're not doing all the active work of the day-to-day on the property. They are simply providing the money to help close that deal, whether you are doing that as a lender, as a joint venture partner, or as a limited partner, meaning you're an LP, it's a limited liability, your liability is restricted to what you invest, and limited activity. You're literally just providing money, somebody else is doing all the work. So I invest as a limited partner in a ton of deals. I love this strategy where I get a great return on my money without any of the headache. And one of the reasons I like it is this, because you can diversify across markets, and I don't have to know everything about all those markets. I just have to make sure that the sponsor, meaning the person who's the general sponsor, the general partner, the one who is the active investor, I'm making sure that they do know their market, that they are a specialist in that area, because that's going to affect how well my money does, right? So I love doing this. I'm invested in 7 different states plus Puerto Rico. I don't have to be there, so it does not matter that it's spread all over the place. So that's a great way for me to diversify. You want to avoid sponsors that spread themselves too thin across lots of states, because chances are they're not vertically integrated in those locations and they can't really understand all those markets. So I do see some sponsors out there where they will literally have like a property in New York and one in California, like on the very furthest coast they could be, and then they go buy something in Canada and something in Florida, and you're like, are you just trying to draw the biggest circle you can, right? That's not the type of sponsors I like to invest with. I want someone who's like, I only buy in Dallas, or I only buy in Miami, Florida, or whatever it is. Or maybe they built one strong core area and they bought a bunch of properties there, 20, 30 properties over here, and then they decided also become market leaders in one other market. So like I said, 1, max 2 is okay, because you could build a team in each of those. You could have a satellite office or 2 main headquarters or something like that. I mentioned vertical integration. So that is where they have their asset acquisition team all together, right? But then they also have in-house property management versus a third-party manager, and in-house construction, where all the turns, all the renovations, and all of that is handled by their own team instead of third-party contractors, where you have to fight for their attention with all the other jobs they have going on, right? So that's a great benefit if you can have all that in-house, but that's very hard to do if you're scattered all over the place. But if you're in one market, you can manage teams like that, and that saves you a lot of money on those various costs, and it lets you control timelines and everything else. So great thing to do. So keep an eye out for that. You want to confirm their local knowledge, and you want to see what their track record has been in that market. How well have they done in the past there? And there's geographic focus can be a benefit to passive investors. So this is not what I do, but I do know some people, they're like, I only invest in this one little area, because then just like with the active investors, they can spot the good deals right away. So they don't have to do even some basic due diligence to make sure the sponsor is getting a good deal before they invest. So I like just being able to take a broad look at something and decide those things. I can do a little bit of light research without having to go deep in to be able to diversify. But some people are like, they don't even want to do that. They just want to know one area, and they just know what they like, and they maybe live there. Maybe they like to drive by the properties that they're invested in, and just to be able to do that. So if you do that, I would suggest still diversifying, but in a different way. If you only want to invest in one geographic area, okay, do that, but do it with multiple different sponsors, or perhaps different asset classes. Maybe you do some apartment complexes and some self-storage, some RV parks, whatever it might be. But diversify in some way, just so you don't have all your eggs in one basket, just because markets can change, sentiment can change. There could be a natural disaster in a particular area, or a particular sponsor business model might fail, or somebody important dies on the team or something like that. So find some way to diversify if you're going to go all in on the geographics. All right, some of the hidden benefits of geographic focus. So we've actually already touched on the first one. That is the insurance savings and the potential for that portfolio coverage. It's huge right now. I mean, insurance has just gone completely crazy. So in particular along the coast where hurricanes have been really bad and in flooding districts, if you can put together a portfolio either on your own or along with a property manager, the savings here can be huge. So definitely look into that. Local tax benefits and development incentives. So in a particular geographic area, they may have particular areas where they want to improve an area. So they'll offer all sorts of incentives for that. Oftentimes that comes in the form of, lost the word for a minute there. It'll come to me. But anyway, it's where they will defer capital gains tax on things that you invest in there, or they will forgive it altogether, or just offer all sorts of other incentives. I invested in a hotel in Puerto Rico where 60% of the investment we put into that property was reimbursed to us by the government after being open for 1 year. So there are lots of little incentive programs like that you may not know about if you're not well versed in that particular area. Tax abatement is also a big one right now. So one of your other really big ticket expense line items is your taxes. And right now, if you're willing to restrict your rents in certain areas or in part of the apartment complex or something like that, you can get huge tax abatement kind of benefits. So you want to look at those as well. And so those are some of those hidden things that you won't know unless you dive deep into your particular market. Stronger operational network and vendor relationships. Obviously, the longer you're in an area, the more roofers you're going to get to know, right? The more property managers, the more brokers, all of that comes together by just sticking to that area, networking like crazy, and getting to know all those people. And finally, easier refinancing and resale due to local market familiarity. And this is really important. I didn't even realize how important this was until I went to apply for my very first loan, where the banker, the very first question he asked is, why here? Why do you want to buy an apartment complex in this town? And I mean, he was dead serious. He wanted to know. Luckily, I had done my research. I knew why I wanted to be there. I'd specifically been looking there for a long time. I was able to give him a good answer. He's like, all right. And then from there on, we just went on with the finances part and I got that loan. But he wanted to know that I knew what I was getting into and why I was doing it. He was a local lender to that area. And so that was really important to them. So it can definitely help with that. Same with resale. You'll know the players. You'll know who your potential buyers are. So all of that is really important. And it just came to me that development, it's opportunity zones. There are opportunity zones. That's an actual designated area within a geographical area where they'll give you tax incentive to do things. So if you have the option to invest on this side of the street versus this side of the street, and this side of the street has an opportunity zone label, you can save a lot of money like taxes by investing there. I knew it would come to me. All right, there we go. So 4 market types to consider. There are lots more, but this is how I usually look at it. The very first thing you want to consider is just your own backyard, like where you live and you know best. Of course, it makes sense to invest there if it aligns with your investment goals. Is that the kind of area that aligns with your goals? So if your goal is building wealth for the future, that, and you don't care if it's cash flowing right now, but it's really strong, you're looking for a market where things are appreciating very quickly. If you live in that market, great, invest right there. If you're looking to cash flow real strong right now, so you want to be where you can buy in a little cheaper, but there's steady cash flow, then it might not be a good fit. Maybe you live in an area that's great to live in, but not great to invest in because maybe there aren't good local laws that are favorable to landlords. So anyway, look at your backyard first. If it meets your goals, great, invest there. If not, you may need to look somewhere else. So where else might you look? How about a place you grew up? or a place that you have lived in the past that you know well. So maybe you've moved 3 or 4 times. And so you think back over the places you've lived, like what might be a good market. Go through your little mental checklist and say, hey, does this align with my goals? Would this work for me? What about a place where you have boots on the ground? So what does that mean, boots on the ground? So oftentimes, or most of the time in commercial real estate, we're investing as a team. There are lots of members of this team. So if you know somebody, if you have a business partner that lives in an area you're considering, that might be a good market. And if you're passively investing, this is where it goes back to, where does the sponsor have people that they're living, right? So that could be all you care about. It's like, hey, I really like this sponsor. They invest in this market, or they invest in this market and that market. I'm going to choose between those two, right? Boots on the ground. If you can't be there, who do you trust that is going to be there? All right. And then this one comes up sometimes too, a place you want to retire someday, okay? So maybe you're actively working right now, but you want to buy an apartment complex somewhere where you want to one day retire to. Maybe you want to actually go live in that apartment complex and be the property manager on site. Maybe that's your goal. I see this with short-term rentals too, right? People buy like Airbnb type of properties, maybe in that ski town that they like, or that beach town or something like that, because ultimately that's where they want to retire. So then maybe they're going to take one of those retirement properties and turn it into their own personal home and maybe manage the rest of the portfolio there. So that's another consideration. Now, there are lots of other considerations. This is just some of the top 4. So when you are looking to choose 1 or 2, you can maybe start with these, and then if none of those work out, then go on to others. But here's a starting point for you at least. All right, market selection framework. Okay, so we want to define those investment goals so we know what we're looking for, right? Because otherwise, how do we look for it, right? Then we want to start gathering the data, real data, not hype, right? So we want to look for that population, job, income, rental data, all that kind of stuff. So here's a few websites. The top 4 here, those are free data, great data. You just get familiar with those sites. Go play around with them. You'd be shocked at all the information that's available to you for free out there. Great data. Now, if you want kind of a one-stop shop where you can get all of it, CoStar is an option. If you happen to be a broker, or if you have good relationships with a broker, you can give them the address of the property you're looking at and ask them for a CoStar report. And these can be literally hundreds of pages long, right? They'll give you all sorts of sales comps, rent comps. They'll show you the past, the future, projections for where they think rents are going to go, vacancy rates are going to go, all sorts of things about that area. They'll compare studio apartments to 3-bedroom apartments, 2 bedrooms, everything else, class A, B, C, D, all the various things. I mean, income projections for 1 mile radius, 3 miles, 5 miles, 10 miles. You can get deep in the weeds with data in CoStar, but it is very expensive. So most individual people are not going to subscribe to it. And you actually buy it by territory, by area, sometimes by state. If you want to get that nationwide, super expensive. But if you know brokers, most commercial brokers, they're going to have access to that, and they can get you a copy if you ask them nicely and build those broker relationships. All right. Active investors, again, you want to pick 1, max 2 focus areas. Passive investors, you want to vet your sponsors, make sure they have a focus and a good track record in a particular area. And then you have to choose whether you want to diversify across multiple areas or stick with 1. And then you want to evaluate hidden benefits and then make a go, no-go checklist, right? So once you know what your investment goals are, just make that list of, okay, do we have the population growth? Do we have the rental income? Do we have the demand? We might want to get into crime statistics if you want to really narrow it down to a particular small area. We can't really do that on a big, broad market range, but you can narrow it down even closer. But anyway, you want to make that checklist of what's important to you and be able to evaluate that quickly on the fly. All right, let's wrap it up. So yes, location truly is everything in real estate. It's why everybody says location, 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 right? You can change the property, you can paint it, you can renovate, you can do all sorts of things, but you cannot change the location. So make sure you get that right. Use real data. Go to those websites that I mentioned. Don't listen to hype. Don't Google some YouTube video, right? go to the hardcore data, really do your due diligence. Active investors, 1 or 2 markets. I think I've harped on that enough. Passive investors, vet the sponsors, make sure they know their geography and what's good in that area. And then look for those hidden benefits because they could save you a ton of money or make you a ton of money. Okay. If you are local to the Orlando area, CFRI, Central Florida Real Estate Investors Group, is where I lead a multifamily focus group where we talk about all these sorts of things. We meet once a month. December 22nd is our next meeting. We're going to do master the terms that make you credible in multifamily and commercial deals. So particularly when you're talking to brokers, they speak a very different language in commercial real estate than they do in the residential single family kind of space. So if you're wanting to get into that, you're going to need to learn that terminology. That's what we're going to be covering on December 2nd. And Jenny Bowling is going to be the presenter on that. So come out and see us. If you're not a CFRI member, you will have to become a member in order to attend this. If you already are, it is included with your membership. So hope to see you there. Normally we meet on Wednesdays. This particular meeting is going to be on a Tuesday. All right, here's my contact information. If I can do anything to help you out in the real estate world, by all means, please hit me up. And if you want to check out my other social media, feel free to connect with me there. Thank you so much for your time. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.